VJ Day in Times Square, 1945. August 14th, 1945, a U.S. sailor kisses a nurse as news of Japan's surrender floods Times Square. Relief and spontaneous joy turn the streets into a living celebration. The photograph crystallizes the exact moment World War II ended for millions, watching at home and on sidewalks. Lunch, atop a skyscraper, 1932. 11 ironworkers perch on a narrow steel beam high above Manhattan, eating lunch and joking as if at ground level. This daring image, shot during Rockefeller Center's construction, reflects the grit and audacity of Depression-era labor-building America's skyline. Migrant Mother, 1936. A mother of 7 stares past the camera, her children clinging to her shoulders. Dorothea Lange's photograph of Florence Owens Thompson during the Great Depression became an icon of resilience and sparked federal relief efforts for desperate farm families. The Falling Soldier, 1936. Captured during the Spanish Civil War, a soldier crumples at the moment of death as Robert Capa presses the shutter. The authenticity remains debated, but the photograph endures as one of the starkest visualizations of war's immediacy and fragility. Earthrise, 1968. Apollo 8 astronauts photograph Earth rising over the moon's horizon, a fragile blue marble against black space. The image shifted human perspective, inspiring environmental movements and reminding everyone of our shared home floating in the cosmic dark. Man refusing Nazi salute, 1936. In a sea of stiff arms raised to Hitler, one shipyard worker stands with arms crossed, refusing. His small act of defiance, caught on camera, became a timeless symbol of moral courage under authoritarianism. Nikola Tesla in his lab, 1899. Tesla sits calmly as giant electrical arcs crackle around his magnifying transmitter. Though staged for dramatic effect, this photograph captures the visionary who dreamed of transmitting power without wires and of harnessing nature's invisible forces. Tutankhamun's tomb sealed, 1922. Howard Carter's team photographs the unbroken cord and clay seal on King Tutankhamun's tomb. After 3,000 years of darkness, the doorway waits one last moment before ancient secrets flood into the modern world. Austrian boy receives shoes, World War II. In post-war Austria, a boy beams as he clutches new shoes given by aid workers. Amid rubble and rationing, the gift of simple footwear becomes a beacon of kindness and the promise of normal life returning. Catherine Switzer, Boston Marathon, 1967. Officials lunge to pull runner Catherine Switzer from the Boston Marathon, but she presses on to finish. This photograph records the instant a major sports tradition began to open to women and equality moved another step forward. Divided Graves, 1888. A Catholic wife and Protestant husband, buried on opposite sides of a cemetery wall, hold hands across the divide. This simple gravestone gesture defies decades of sectarian division and speaks to love that endures beyond rules. Harold Whittles, Here's Sound, 1974. A young boy's face explodes with wonder as a hearing aid lets him experience sound for the first time. Now, the photograph captures the transformative power of technology and the pure astonishment of a new sense awakening. German soldiers. Watch camp footage, a 1945, captured Wehrmacht. Soldiers sit in a darkened hall, eyes fixed on images of liberated concentration camps. Their expressions of shock and disbelief mark the moment propaganda dissolves and reality pierces through. Families across the Berlin Wall, 1961. Parents in West Berlin lift children so grandparents on the east can glimpse them over the new concrete barrier. The camera records the first heartbreak of a city suddenly severed by politics and ideology. Acrobats atop the Empire State, 1934, high above New York, acrobats balance on lightning rods without nets. Their audacious stunts embody a Depression-era appetite for spectacle and reveal how small humans look against the structures they create. Lesbian couple in Paris, 1932. At Le Monocle nightclub, two women sit closely together, eyes meeting the camera. In an era of secrecy and stigma, this candid photograph preserves a flash of queer joy and quiet defiance, offering a rare glimpse of forbidden nightlife between the wars. Mafia boss Joe Masseria, 1931. Brooklyn, 1931. Mob boss Joe Masseria lies dead at a restaurant table, still holding a playing card. This crime scene image captures the violent underworld of Prohibition-era New York, where betrayal and power struggles ended abruptly in gunfire. Statue of Liberty under construction, 1884. Workers in Paris assemble Lady Liberty piece by piece before she is shipped across the Atlantic. This photograph shows a colossal gift in progress, an emblem of freedom not yet raised on its pedestal in New York Harbor. Last photo of Titanic, 1912. Father Francis Brown captures the Titanic leaving Queenstown, Ireland, in its last known photograph afloat. Majestic and unsinkable in myth, the liner will soon vanish beneath the Atlantic, transforming this image into a relic of doomed grandeur. Women delivering ice, 1918. Long before refrigerators, women shoulder heavy blocks of ice up flights of stairs to city apartments. This rare photograph highlights invisible labor and the sheer physicality of everyday survival in the early 20th century. Armenian woman guards her home, 1990. In Nagorno-Karabakh, a 106-year-old Armenian woman grips an AK-47 outside her small house. Her image embodies endurance and defiance, a life spanning empires, wars, and still protecting the last patch of home she calls hers. Last known thylacine, 1933. A striped Tasmanian tiger paces its pen at Beaumaris Zoo. This haunting photograph preserves one of the final glimpses of a species driven to extinction, a cautionary frame about loss and responsibility. Baby cages, 1937. London mothers attach wire cages outside apartment windows so babies can nap in fresh air. The photograph blends 1930s public health advice with risk, capturing a practice that now seems almost surreal. Measuring bathing suits, 1920s. On a crowded beach, officials kneel with tape measures to ensure women's swimsuits meet decency standards. This photograph shows how public morality once policed bodies and how freedom of dress has evolved since. Machu Picchu discovery, 1911. Hiram Bingham and his team stand among stone terraces just cleared of jungle. This first photograph of Machu Picchu reveals a lost Incan city to the outside world, transforming archaeology and tourism and sparking a century-long fascination with the Andes. Einstein's sticks-out tongue, 1951. Leaving his birthday celebration, Albert Einstein turns to the press and mischievously sticks out his tongue. This candid photograph humanizes the 20th century's greatest physicist, contrasting his reputation for cosmic intellect with a moment of childlike playfulness. Wright brothers' first flight, 1903. A fragile wooden plane lifts from Kitty Hawk sand dunes for 12 seconds. This single photograph captures humanity's first powered flight, a quiet revolution that will soon reshape travel, warfare, and imagination across the planet. Breadline during the Depression, 1930s. Men in worn coats line up outside a soup kitchen as winter fog drifts past. This photograph embodies the desperation of the Great Depression and the rise of new social safety nets in the United States. Rosa Parks' mugshot, 1955. Rosa Parks stares calmly into the camera after refusing to surrender her bus seat in Montgomery. This booking photo transforms a quiet seamstress into the face of a civil rights movement demanding dignity and justice. The Beatles' rooftop concert, 1969. On a gray London rooftop, the Beatles plug in their guitars for an unannounced lunchtime concert. Caught on camera, it becomes their final live performance and an enduring snapshot of the band's spontaneous creativity. Flag over the Reichstag, 1945. A Soviet soldier raises his nation's flag above the ruined Reichstag. Though staged, the photograph crystallizes the fall of Nazi Germany and the Allied victory in Europe, becoming a defining symbol of the war's end. Churchill Portrait, 1941. Yusuf Karsh captures Winston Churchill glaring at the camera after snatching away his cigar. The resulting portrait project's grit and determination, quickly becoming the most famous image of Britain's wartime leader. Tank Man, Tiananmen Square, 1989. A lone figure holding shopping bags steps in front of a column of tanks. His identity and fate unknown, but this photograph embodies courage in the face of overwhelming power and censorship. First color photo of Earth from space, 1967. From orbit, a satellite sends back the first true color photograph of Earth. Swirls of clouds over blue oceans shift our perspective, transforming our planet into a single, unified sphere in the public imagination. Marilyn Monroe in Korea, 1954. Monroe beams at thousands of soldiers during a USO tour. Standing on a makeshift stage in freezing weather, she brings a few minutes of glamour to an otherwise bleak and muddy front line. Martin Luther King Jr. at Lincoln Memorial, 1963. Minutes before his I Have a Dream speech, Dr. King looks over a sea of faces. The photograph captures the anticipation and scale of a defining moment in America's civil rights history. Apollo 11. Astronauts after splashdown, 1969. Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins wave from behind the glass of a quarantine trailer after returning from the moon. The image blends heroism with caution. Explorers home but still isolated from their own planet. First, UN General Assembly, 1946. Delegates from 51 nations gather under high ceilings in London. This photograph shows the hopeful birth of a global institution meant to prevent another world war, capturing a rare moment of unity. Mandela walks free, 1990. Nelson. Mandela steps from prison after 27 years, his fist raised. Cameras click as history pivots from repression toward reconciliation, marking South Africa's transition from apartheid to democracy. Hindenburg disaster, 1937. Flames engulf the massive airship as it attempts to dock in New Jersey. This photograph sears the tragedy into the public mind and effectively ends the era of passenger dirigibles overnight. Anne Frank's last known photo, 1942. A school portrait shows Anne Frank smiling shyly before her family goes into hiding. Her diary and this photograph outlast her life to tell a story the world cannot forget. Suffragette, arrested outside Parliament, 1910s. A woman in Edwardian dress is dragged by police at a demonstration for the vote. This photograph shows the personal risk and public struggle behind women's suffrage. NASA's Human Computers, 1960s. Rows of women sit at desks with pencils and adding machines, calculating trajectories for space flights. This photograph highlights the hidden figures whose math powered the space race long before digital computers. Empire State Completion Celebration, 1931. Workers cluster on steel beams at dizzying heights to celebrate topping out the world's tallest building. The photograph captures grit, pride, and the audacity of Depression-era engineering. Golf on the Moon, 1971. Astronaut Alan Shepard swings a makeshift club on the moon, sending a ball drifting in low gravity. This whimsical photograph reminds us that even in alien landscapes, humans find a moment to play. Opening day of Disneyland, 1955. Families stream through gates under a sunny California sky. Walt Disney smiles in the crowd, watching a fantasy park transform from blueprint to reality in a single day. Picasso at home with Gillot, 1950s. On a sunlit beach, Pablo Picasso strolls shirtless with Françoise Gillot. This candid photograph humanizes the world's most famous painter, revealing the private life behind the public myth. Elvis Presley in the Army, 1958. The king of rock and roll stands in uniform, hair trimmed, boarding a military transport. This photograph captures a pop icon submitting to the draft and the blending of celebrity with national duty. Jackie Kennedy at JFK's funeral, 1963. Veiled in black, Jacqueline Kennedy stands by her husband's casket. The photograph records grace under unimaginable pressure and becomes a lasting symbol of public mourning and national loss. Helicopter evacuation from Saigon, 1975. As North Vietnamese troops close in, a helicopter hovers over Saigon rooftop. Civilians climb a rickety ladder to escape. This photograph captures the final, desperate hours of the Vietnam War and the scramble to evacuate U.S. allies. Stonewall Inn after the riots, 1969. Boarded windows, chalk slogans, and quiet defiance remain after nights of confrontation in Greenwich Village. This photograph marks the moment LGBTQ+ resistance erupted into the open, igniting a movement that would transform public life and law. Gandhi at his spinning wheel, 1946. Mahatma Gandhi sits cross-legged, spinning thread by hand. This photograph distills his philosophy of self-reliance and nonviolent resistance, turning a simple act of spinning cotton into a political weapon against imperial rule. Woodstock Festival crowd, 1969. 500,000 people stretch across a New York farm, tents and mud everywhere. This photograph captures a generation's convergence of music, protest, and communal experiment at the height of the counterculture. 1939 New York World's Fair, the Trilon and Perisphere Towers gleam with futuristic optimism. Photographed just before World War II, the fair's sleek architecture promised the world of tomorrow, while the old world slid toward catastrophe. Another angle of Monroe's Korean tour, 1954. From a different vantage, Marilyn Monroe appears tiny on stage before a sea of uniformed soldiers. This photograph shows the scale of her reception and the contrast between Hollywood glamour and battlefield grit. Charles Lindbergh and the Spirit of St. Louis, 1927. Lindbergh stands beside his single-engine plane after crossing the Atlantic. This photograph captures exhaustion, youth, and audacity, heralding an age of global flight pioneered by one determined pilot. Mount Rushmore under construction, 1930s. Workers dangle from ropes as dynamite blasts granite. This unfinished photograph shows the colossal effort behind the presidential faces and the human scale dwarfed by stone. Apollo-Soyuz handshake, 1975. Two Cold War spacecraft dock in orbit and astronauts shake hands through a hatch. This photograph records a brief moment of detente when rivalry paused for cooperation above Earth. Berlin Wall falls, 1989. Crowds hammer at concrete, climb atop the wall, and embrace strangers from the other side. This photograph catches the instant a divided world suddenly rejoined in celebration. Early microchip lab, 1959. An engineer leans over a microscope to etch one of the first integrated circuits. This photograph shows the quiet birth of a technology that will power everything from space probes to smartphones. Frida Kahlo painting in hospital bed, 1953. Immobilized by pain, Kahlo paints from her hospital bed. This photograph reveals the artist's refusal to stop creating even as her body fails, turning suffering into vivid color. First email sent demonstration, 1971. A nondescript computer terminal in a small office transmits the world's first email. This photograph captures the humble origins of a revolution in communication now woven into daily life. Hendrix at Woodstock, 1969. Jimi Hendrix kneels, guitar wailing the national anthem into the morning air. This photograph captures a moment when music, protest, and patriotism collided in electrifying sound. Apollo 11, bootprint on the moon, 1969. A single footprint pressed into lunar dust stands in eerie stillness. This photograph records humanity's first steps on another world, likely to outlast all our monuments on Earth. Muhammad Ali versus Sonny Liston, 1965. Ali stands over a fallen Liston, his right arm cocked, shouting. This photograph fuses sport and spectacle into one of the most iconic images of athletic dominance. Bob Dylan goes electric, 1965. Dylan grips an electric guitar at Newport Folk Festival as boos rise. This photograph captures the exact moment folk purism yielded to a louder, electrified future of rock music. CERN control room. Before the web, 1980s, technicians sit at beige consoles in Switzerland's particle physics lab. This photograph shows the ordinary setting where Tim Berners-Lee would soon conceive the World Wide Web. Early black hole simulation, 1979. Scientists produced one of the first computer renderings of a black hole's appearance. This photograph preserves imagination decades ahead of observation, a digital prophecy later confirmed. First handheld mobile phone call, 1973. Engineer Martin Cooper holds a brick-sized device to his ear on a New York sidewalk. This photograph marks the start of mobile telephony, shrinking the world into a pocket. Valentina Tereshkova. Before launch, 1963. The first woman in space smiles as technicians adjust her helmet. This photograph shows a poised, determined face moments before she rockets into history aboard Vostok 6. Opening of the Channel Tunnel, 1994. British and French tunnelers clasp hands deep under the seabed. This photograph symbolizes a new era of European connection, bridging a channel that had divided nations for millennia. Mandela with Rugby World Cup, 1995. Wearing a Springbok jersey, Nelson Mandela hands the trophy to Captain Francois Pienaar. This photograph embodies reconciliation and national unity forged through sport. First Apple computer team, 1976. In a cluttered garage, Jobs and Wozniak hunch over circuit boards. This photograph captures the modest beginnings of a company that would redefine personal technology. Tian Shan Glacier. Before, after, 1970s to 2000s. Two paired photographs decades apart show ice retreating to expose bare rock. Together they form one visual record of climate change unfolding in real time. Muhammad Ali lights Olympic torch, 1996. Hands trembling from Parkinson's. Muhammad Ali lifts the torch at the Atlanta Games. The crowd erupts as he ignites the flame. This photograph frames a man who defied war, racism, and illness, still inspiring the world with courage and grace. Last Concorde flight, 2003. The supersonic Concorde touches down for the final time at Heathrow. This photograph captures the end of an era of civilian flight at twice the speed of sound, a sleek machine making its last graceful bow. Tempelhof Airport as refugee shelter, 2015. Built for Nazi air power, Berlin's vast Tempelhof Airport now houses rows of cots for Syrian refugees. This photograph shows a place designed for war repurposed as a haven for the displaced and vulnerable. First photograph of Earth from the moon's surface, 1969. Armstrong turns the camera toward Earth suspended above the lunar horizon. This photograph lets humanity see its home from another world for the first time, a fragile orb of blues and whites. London Great Smog, 1952. Buses crawl through a thick yellow fog that killed thousands over 5 days. This photograph becomes evidence that leads to Britain's first Clean Air Acts, transforming policy and public health. Afghan Girl with Green Eyes, 1984. A refugee's piercing stare arrests the viewer in a Pakistan camp. This photograph becomes an icon of displacement and resilience, embodying the hidden human cost of global conflict. The first selfie, 1839. Robert Cornelius removes his lens cap, dashes into the frame, and sits motionless for a minute. The resulting photograph is the world's first self-portrait, a 19th century ancestor of today's selfies. D-Day landings, Omaha Beach, 1944. Soldiers leap into cold surf under fire, captured in blurred frames by Robert Capa. This photograph conveys the chaos and courage of the largest amphibious invasion in history. Malala returns to school, 2013. Months after surviving an assassination attempt, Malala Yousafzai walks into a classroom with a backpack. This photograph quietly records defiance in the guise of normal school routine. First 3D printed prosthetic for a child, 2014. A boy flexes his brightly colored 3D printed arm assembled by volunteers. This photograph represents technology bending toward compassion and a future of accessible prosthetics. New York Blackout, 1977. A city of 8 million plunges into darkness. This photograph shows candles flickering in apartment windows and outlines of strangers crossing empty intersections. A metropolis briefly returned to shadows. First photo from Everest summit, 1953. Flags whip in thin air at the top of the world. This photograph records the moment Hillary and Tenzing achieved what once seemed impossible, standing on Earth's highest point. Chernobyl reactor aerial, 1986. Helicopters hover above a smoking reactor core. This photograph captures the scale of the nuclear disaster and the invisible radiation spreading beyond the frame, a catastrophe etched in graphite and steel. Dolly the sheep, 1996. In an ordinary pen stands Dolly, the first cloned mammal. This photograph hides a scientific breakthrough in plain sight. Life replicated, ethics debated. 9/11 Falling Man, 2001. A lone figure falls from the North Tower on September 11th. This photograph, too painful for many to view, nonetheless freezes an instant of unfathomable horror and human vulnerability. Obama Situation Room, 2011. President Obama and his team lean forward in tense silence, eyes fixed on a screen. This photograph places viewers inside the room as the bin Laden raid unfolds in real time. Syrian archaeologist at Palmyra, 2010. Khalid al-Assad stands before ancient columns he spent a lifetime protecting. This photograph becomes a testament to cultural guardianship when he is later murdered for refusing to abandon the site. Refugees crossing the Mediterranean, 2015. Dozens cram into an inflatable boat under a burning sky. This photograph reflects a timeless migration story, flight from danger, the search for safety, and the thin line between hope and loss. Mars rover selfie, 2020. On another planet, a robotic explorer turns its camera back on itself. This photograph frames dusty wheels, alien rocks, and a distant sky, a postcard sent home from Mars. Greta Thunberg at UN, 2019. A teenage activist glares at world leaders during the climate summit. This photograph spreads globally, symbolizing a generation's anger and demand for accountability on a warming planet. James Webb Space Telescope. First deep field, 2022. A speckled tapestry of galaxies fills the frame. This photograph, billions of years in the making, gives humanity its deepest, sharpest look into the cosmic past. Ukrainian civilians making Molotovs, 2022. Ordinary citizens in winter coats fill bottles with gasoline, preparing improvised weapons. This photograph shows the face of grassroots resistance in the 21st century's newest war zone. Artemis Mission Earthrise, 2024. From beyond the moon, Artemis captures Earth in dazzling color. This photograph is the newest echo of 1968's Earthrise, our world reflected back to us from space. First known photo of a black hole simulation, 1979. On primitive computers, scientists simulate how a black hole might appear. This photograph preserves a digital prophecy decades before the Event Horizon Telescope's real image. Full-color Earth from Artemis Mission, 2024. Our planet glows in brilliant blues and greens beyond the moon's curve. This final photograph closes the journey through 100 frames of memory, each revealing our shared human story.